Hello and welcome to the Westcity Church podcast. If you'd like to get to know us more, find us at westcitychurch.com.au. We really hope that you're encouraged by today's message.
I'm here in virtual church today to talk about comfort food. Kerry and I were talking about comfort food the other day and what our comfort foods were. What's yours? Chocolate? Chips? 2 old beef patties with special sauce with lettuce, fake plastic cheese, pickle and all on a sesame seed bun? Kerry's is Vegemite toast. Yum. But mine is this. Ice cream. That is the best comfort food. I can prove it. Many years ago, a colleague of mine, an older colleague who didn't have long left to live, Canon Monty Nell was his name. He told me his dream. It's a real dream. He dreamt that he went to heaven. And Canon Monty was a very gentle chap. He went to heaven in some trepidation. And instead of St. Peter on the gate, he found Archdeacon Harris. You don't know Archdeacon Harris, it's probably just as well. He was really a nice man, but he was known to be very fierce with clergy. And he went up to ask Arnold Harris if he could get in. And the Archdeacon said to him, "You have to do a maths test." Monty wasn't very good at maths, so he turned away sorrowfully and went round the corner in the walls of the heaven all around here, and he went round the corner and he discovered there was a break in the wall. And he was about to go through the break when St. Francis appeared. Now, Monty was a very good Franciscan like me and recognised St. Francis straight away. And he said, "Hello, Francis." And Francis said, "Hello, Monty." And Jesus was with them. He said, "Jesus and I and all these people behind, a great crowd of them, are going down to give ice cream to the people in hell. And so would you like to join us?" So Monty joined in and down they went to hell and gave the people ice cream. That was the end of Monty Nell's dream. And he never told me what happened to the people in hell afterwards or the people from heaven who went to give them ice cream. But it proves that ice cream is the best comfort food. What was comfort food for the disciples of Jesus in the Easter period? After he'd risen from the dead, shocking them and surprising them after the disappointment of his crucifixion, all they had to remember him by was the symbols he gave them on the last night, not comfort food as such, but very basic food. And that was to be their comfort. Of course, comfort food is for the soul, not for the body, as Jesus well knew. So he gave them this sacrament of bread, simple bread and simple wine, the staples of life. And that gave them hope, security and community. In our Lenten studies, Brian Zahn talks about the rich young ruler who came to Jesus asking how he could be saved. And Jesus said, "What are the commandments?" And he named them, but he left out the last one, as Brian points out. "Thou shalt not covet." That was because he was rich. One of the Gospels says he was young, another one says he was a ruler, but they all agree that he was rich. And Jesus said, give up all your possessions and follow me. And according to Mark, he went away sorrowful. According to Luke, he didn't go away at all, just remained there and perhaps became one of Jesus' disciples. Wonder what he thought of the bread and wine as a simple symbol of his existence, no longer coveting, no longer dependent on possessions. He learnt the lesson of Jesus in Luke 14:33, which says, if any of you wants to be my disciple, you must give up all your possessions. And so the possessions became synonymous with their communion. And so when you come to the table this morning, think about comfort food. Think about whether you can afford to have Big Macs and chocolate all the time, or whether you'd rather have the simple gifts of bread and wine, the symbols of our communion and of our love for one another and our love for Jesus. God bless you.
Here we are. It is great to be here. Always a humbling experience to be able to speak to you. And my prayer this morning is just as Trav prayed, that these words would actually be words of love, words of life. That just as you've sat and experienced music and prayer, and later on you'll experience each other's company, that these words would also be life-giving to you. As Phil mentioned, we are in a series around the Lord's Prayer, which is the middle part of the Sermon on the Mount. And my first experience of the Lord's Prayer was actually in primary school. I went to Allenswood Primary School, and that was a little government primary school in Greenwood. And every assembly, we would say the Lord's Prayer. Now, I've come to learn that it was the old King James version. Our Father, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespassed against us, and on it went. And now as a child saying that at assembly, had no idea what those big words meant. And I can still hear in my head the voices of everyone saying it together. And eventually you learnt it over time. And I'm not sure why we said the Lord's Prayer at assembly. Maybe it's just some of an old tradition that went by. We also did have religion in life classes at school. So obviously I wonder whether the deputy principal or the principal at the time maybe had a faith and wanted us to learn. But that was my first experience of the Lord's Prayer. Didn't really understand what it meant. It didn't really have any deep impact in me, I have to admit. But there's something beautiful about now in my mid-40s, still having that as something I've learnt that's embedded in my brain and I can recall quite easily. I wonder when you first heard the Lord's Prayer. Perhaps it's today. Perhaps you've never heard this passage of Scripture read before. But either way, I trust that God is able to speak to you through it. And this morning, the line of the prayer that I've been given to explore with you is, give us this day our daily bread. It's a small little line in the middle of the prayer. And in the New Revised Standard Version, it does say, give us this day our daily bread. In Eugene Peterson's version, the Message, he said, keep us alive with 3 square meals. The Bible Project translated to say, our daily provision of bread give to us today. So it's clear this line revolves around bread. Now, I don't know about you, but I find bread one of life's simple pleasures. I'm not gluten-free at all. And so for me, the thought of a freshly baked loaf of bread, maybe some balsamic vinegar, some beautiful olive oil, it could just be some bread and butter, I just think is one of life's simple pleasures. And right before COVID, I had the privilege of doing taking a sourdough bread making class. Was not aware of what was to come with COVID, but I was well prepared so that when COVID hit, I had my sourdough starter all set to go, and while the rest of the world continued to jump on a sourdough train, there was a whole pile of us making sourdough during COVID. And that smell of bread baking in the oven at home is pretty spectacular. Bread is really one of life's simple pleasures, and it speaks to this idea of simple sustenance, doesn't it? That everyone should have the right to bread, that we should at least have bread to live on. And in this line of the prayer, as you talk about giving us this day our daily bread, there's this idea of satiating our hunger in a simple and in a nourishing way. You know, I'm not thinking of a flimsy white piece of bread that you might get from the supermarket. I am thinking of that wholesome, crusty kind of, you tap on it and it's hollow. That's how you know a sourdough's cooked. That kind of bread. You know, this line in the prayer cuts to the core of our hunger, both physically and spiritually. And this morning, I hope the question it raises for you and the one it raised for me as I began to look into it is, how do we go about feeding ourselves? How do we go about keeping ourselves full? Do we hustle and hustle and hustle and hustle some more until we have our fill? Or do we trust in the goodness and the simple provision of God? It's a simple question, but it has profound implications. To truly be able to pray to God, Lord, give me today, give us today our daily bread. It flies in the face of our culture, the culture around us that pushes us towards independence and a constant striving for more, more, more. This line positions us in a place of need and invites us to know contentment in the now. You know, bread in this prayer does seem to have a double meaning that covers both the physical reality of being fed by bread and a deep nourishment that our souls need. So this morning, as I further explore what bread is looking like in this line of the Lord's Prayer, I'm going to look at a couple of passages in the Gospels where both Jesus and bread cross over. Interestingly enough, there's actually over 300 references to bread in the Bible, and it was fascinating as I had a quick look through at all the different ways bread talks both about a physical bread for those in physical need, and this idea of bread being this thing that sustains us and keeps us going on a much kind of more soulful space. And you know, if I can be honest, I'm not fully sure where this message will take us, because there's a lot in my head, there's some in my notes, and you know, I struggled to find the right amount of time to feel like I'd given this due diligence. But I had to just surrender and go, you know what, Lord, I just trust that you'll lead my words and you'll speak in ways that you need to hear. So if you're happy to go on the journey with me, let's do that. And the first thing I want to talk about is the idea of first things first. Previous to the Sermon in the Mount in Matthew, there's this passage where Jesus is in the wilderness and he's fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. And he's tempted by the devil in 3 different ways. In the first temptation, he's tempted by Satan to turn stones into bread to feed himself. But he answers like this. Jesus says, "But it is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." And here Jesus is actually quoting from Deuteronomy. And I want to read you the fuller passage that this short line from Jesus comes from, because I think it speaks to this hunger and the challenge we face of how we're going to actually feed our hunger. In Deuteronomy 8, verse 2, it's written, "Remember the long way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness." And this is referring to the people of Israel at the time. "In order to humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commandments. He humbled you by letting you hunger, then by feeding you with manna, with which you nor your ancestors were acquainted, in order to make you understand that one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Eugene Peterson, reflecting upon this temptation that Jesus faced, says it this way: "There's certainly nothing wrong with getting something to eat when you're hungry. Jesus got hungry. You get hungry. I get hungry. So how can it be a temptation to get some bread, whether by miracle or by money? The temptation is to put the bread first and God second, to put the need for bread at the centre of our lives and our need for God at the edges. Jesus wouldn't do it. He said that his need for God preceded his need for bread. He said that the word of God was basic to his human life, that bread was also necessary but secondary. He said that he would attend to God first and bread second. In my words, he'd put the first things first. Now, I wonder what it would look like in your life. I know it's a challenge and something I have to look at in my own life if I was to attend to God first and our hunger second. And now when I say hunger there, you can fill that with whatever you want to fill that with. We're all wired so differently, and I think that if we actually went around and spoke to each one of us, we'd have a different answer for what is that driving hunger that actually drives you each day. For some of us, depending upon the situation we find ourselves in life, that could well be a physical hunger. There's a challenge of not knowing where your next meal is coming from. There's a challenge of having to constantly be thinking about how to feed your family. That can be a very real challenge. For others, it could be this intense drive to want to achieve, to want to make something of ourselves, or to accumulate, to gather the things that we think we need to actually be considered important in this life. You know, when I think practically about a way this had to look in my own life, as some of you would know, but not all of you know, that I am married and I have 4 kids. And so there was a stage when our youngest, Eden, was still a baby, having 4 kids at home. 2 were at school, 2 were at home. But as you can imagine, it was a busy season of our life. Gavin was starting a business, and the days were long, and they felt hard, and they felt suffocating at times, shall we say. But I really cared about getting a meal on the table. I don't know why, but for some reason getting a good meal on the table just felt like something that was my responsibility and something I really needed to do. But I cannot tell you how difficult and how challenging that was in that season. I'm sure the mums in the room understand. And so I had this real sense of defeat at not being able to get a meal on the table, not being able to cook a meal that I felt was reflective of what my family deserved. And I remember being so deflated by feeling like the one thing I'm meant to do, you know, I'm meant to be a good mum. I've got all these expectations on myself I'm not able to achieve. And, you know, when you're sleep deprived and you're constantly exhausted, your mind does horrible things in those spaces, right? It can take you into some pretty dark places. But then I remember gently one day as I was praying and felt quite deflated, I remember God just giving me permission to just love my children well and let the dinner sort itself out one way or the other. And at first part of me is like, well, what do you mean? So what, we don't eat dinner? You know, you get kind of... And I remember just this gentle sense of God just encouraging me, just love your children well. Make the goal of your day that you're all happy at the end of the day as best you can. And if it's baked beans on toast, it's baked beans on toast. And now for some of you, that might not feel like a huge life, you know, kind of mic drop moment, but that was a really big shift for me as I recognised God calling me, say, will you truly put people first? Or your expectation of what you're meant to do first. And so I decided in that moment that I, despite watching others around me able to do it flawlessly and just put this wonderful meal on the table, that wasn't going to be my goal in the day. My goal in the day was going to be that we had a good day as best we could, and that at the end of the day I could put the kids to bed with a smile on my face if possible. And if we had eggs on toast, we had eggs on toast, and if we had a great meal, we had a great meal. And that was life-changing for me. As I gave myself permission, as I heard God give me permission to actually put first things first. And, you know, I could say that every day from that point was roses and, you know, I just wonderfully achieved that. You know, it's Mother's Day, so let's be honest. My children are here to bear the stories that probably wasn't the case most days. There's plenty of days that I, you know, behaved in ways as a mum that I'm now ashamed of, and I wished I knew now what I knew then. And, you know, you have to be kind to yourselves, right? And just tell your kids that you'll pay for their therapy. So there were days where it didn't work and it all fell apart. But then there were days where we had some wonderfully fun afternoons after school pickup, you know, blowing bubbles outside, perhaps going to the park, whatever it might look like. And then I was putting the kids to bed with a smile on my face, and we'd had baked beans on toast. And when I hear this challenge of give us today our daily bread, putting first things first, that's one of the things I remember. God just challenging me, will I truly put people first? Or will I put my thoughts, my expectations of what I think people need first? Had many more of those stories throughout motherhood, that's for sure, but that was one that I remember in particular. Further on in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus goes on to talk a little bit more about what it looks like to put first things first. And I want to read you this passage out of the Message. It's a longer passage, so I was trying to work out if I would shorten it, but it says so beautifully and so I think just clearly what needs to be said. So I'm going to slowly read you this passage. So close your eyes if you need to close your eyes. Focus however you can. I trust that God will speak to you through it. If you decide to live for God, living a life of God worship, it follows that you don't fuss about what's on the table at mealtimes or whether the clothes in your closet are in fashion. There is far more to your life than the food you put in your stomach, more to your outer appearance than the clothes you hang on your body. Look at the birds, free and unfettered, not tied down to a job description, careless in the care of God, and you count far more to him than birds. Has anyone, by fussing in front of the mirror, ever gotten taller by so much as an inch? All this time and money wasted on fashion, do you think it makes that much difference? Instead of looking at the fashions, walk out into the fields and look at the wildflowers. They never primp or shop, but have you ever seen colour and design quite like it? The 10 best dressed men and women in the country look shabby alongside them. If God gives such attention to the appearance of wildflowers, most of them which are never seen, don't you think he'll attend to you, take pride in you, do his best for you? What I'm trying to do here is get you to relax, to not be so preoccupied with getting, so you can respond to God's giving. People who don't know God and the way he works fuss over these things, but you know both God and how he works. Steep your life in God reality, God initiative, God provisions. Don't worry about missing out. You'll find all your everyday human concerns will be met. Give your entire attention to what God is doing right now. Don't get worked up about what may or may not happen tomorrow. God will help you deal with whatever hard things come up when the time comes. If you're able to take that in and actually live that out, it's quite transformative. It's life-changing. It's an invitation to a life of rest, knowing that your provision comes from God, not your own hustle. Now, will God use your own work and your own achievements to provide for you? Absolutely. But the order in these things becomes crucial. Is it your work and your hustle that's the important part? Or is it God's provision that's your starting place? Give us today our daily bread. This starting point of God being our provider is an equalizer. It's a leveler. It generates a humility amongst us that becomes a beautiful basis for community. So rather than attributing importance or value upon who has more or who has less, there's an understanding that whatever any one of us has, God is the provider. It's a humbling space to be. As I said at the beginning, it places us in a position of need from the outset. It's a recognition that God will provide for us. So first things first, and then very quickly, the second thing I wanted to share is the idea that enough is enough. Give us this day our daily bread invites us to a place of contentment that enough is enough. Not that more is enough. If only I had, when I get. Enough is enough. If we can live from a belief that God will provide, then we can share what we have without fear of running out, trusting that it is enough. Now, I don't know about you, but those memories of the supermarkets during COVID are like scarring and traumatic. And I honestly found them really traumatic. I couldn't actually go to the supermarket and deal with the kind of the crazy chaos of everyone just going and grabbing. Because if I can be honest, I just get possessed and I get worried that we're going to run out, and the panic in me just rises and rises and rises, and all of a sudden I'm wanting to jostle and grab and make my way to the front of the checkout. Gavin had to do all our shopping during COVID, He found the whole thing fascinating. His brain was just wide-eyed, taking it all in, and he'd come home and tell all these wonderful stories about how they had to shut the store, they shut the doors, and I'm just feeling sick with stress at the thought of it. Brené Brown says this: the opposite of scarcity is not abundance. The opposite of scarcity is simply enough. And this line of the Lord's Prayer, "Give us today our daily bread," is an invitation to recognise that enough will actually be enough. Can we trust that God, in His way, will allow us to be present to those around us because we have enough? Can we share what we've been given by God today, trusting that there'll also be provision from God tomorrow? There's an author, Parker Palmer, who expounds the famous miracle of Jesus of the loaves and the fishes, where, the disciples, Jesus asked the disciples to feed this massive thousands of crowds, and they look at him and go like, "Are you joking? We don't have bread. We don't have any food." And he says, "To gather what's there, and it's a small amount of bread and it's a small amount of fish, and by a miracle everyone is fed." And Parker Palmer, as he pulls out, kind of explores this narrative, also goes, the other miracle that we forget here is that people had enough and there were leftovers. So not only was there enough generated somehow miraculously that everybody was fed, but we have a people that were satisfied and had leftovers, more to share for others. And it was a beautiful way of recognising a different miracle that actually in our day and age, feeling contentment can actually seem like a miracle. That with all the advertising coming at us, that we just need more, we need this, we need that, that actually to land in a place of rest and contentment truly feels like a miracle and a work of God. How do we only take what we need so there's enough resource in the world to go around? It's a challenging question, isn't it? And for those of us living in the West, it's something we have to face on a daily basis. I by no means confess to have that sorted, but feel confident that asking ourselves that question has to have some kind of answer in it. As we finish up this morning, we're going to head to the table. We're going to share communion together. And it's fascinating to me that Peter talked about his comfort foods and really brought into picture the idea of the bread and the cup. And this morning I want to challenge us to really lean into the fact that we have a tiny piece of bread, perhaps a little cracker, and a small cup of juice. Physically, it's very little to eat. It's very little to sustain us. It's not going to do the job of giving us our calories for the day. But yet, can we engage in communion this morning in such a way that we actually believe that this little symbol of bread, this symbol of juice, is actually enough? That what God is able to do in us through the work of Christ is actually enough, that Christ is enough for me. It's an ongoing challenge. It's not one we're going to solve through one example of taking communion or one prayer. I wonder if that's why Jesus has this in this prayer. Give us today our daily bread, because perhaps there's something in the daily asking of that allows us to reposition ourselves again. And then we reposition ourselves again and again and again and again, recognising that it's from that place of need and that trust in God's provision that we truly can find the contentment that He has for us. So I'm going to invite the band to come up, and then I'm going to invite you to the table. The helpers can come forward too. Now, I'm actually assuming we may not have helpers today with Peter being on the video. So if anyone's able to come and help hand out communion, that would be really, really wonderful. Thank you. So as we come to communion this morning, let me remind you that this is the table, not of the church, but of the Lord. It's made ready for those who love God and for those who want to love God more. So come, you who have much faith and you who have little. You who have been here often and you who come for the first time. You who have tried to follow and you who have failed, come. Because it is the Lord who invites you, and it is God's will that those who want Christ should meet Him here.
Thank you so much for joining us. Each week at Westcity, we say a benediction together. We do this because we believe that the purpose of the church is to be a caring community for the world, and that as we go and serve others, we enter into Christ's work of welcome, restoration and healing, both for us and others. We believe that in doing so, we get to see and encounter Christ. So let's say the benediction together. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So we will go out and feed the hungry, go out and clothe the naked, go out and fight for justice, go out and end oppression, go out and proclaim anew the old story, go out and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, and don't even like us. And we'll do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.